Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
What started the spiritualist movement, and who were the young mediums that shocked America? Joining me is Robin Reale tonight to talk about the Fox sisters and the early development of spiritualism and how it was kind of catapulted by these two young women who were called the Fox sisters. Welcome, Robin. I'm so happy to have you here again. This is very exciting.
It's exciting for me. I like teaching and talking about the history of spiritualism. So I hope people have questions because they could be answered, this evening or not. In any case.
So we're live as we're going live on Facebook. Please write in your questions as you listen to us. And if you want to know some more, please let us know. We're here.
All righty. So let me start. A lot of people have questions about the origin of the three Fox sisters. And we have Leah Fox. And Leah Fox was born in Rockland County, New York, April 4th, 1813. And it's interesting, where she was born is not far from where Andrew Jackson Davis was born.
Oh.
And not far from where Sojourner Truth, obviously against her will, was held as a slave in that part of New York.
Wow.
Very interesting. And, so we've got three major powerhouses. Sojourner Truth in that part of New York State, Andrew Jackson Davis, and Leah was born there. Although her family ended up moving. So the Fox family, Mom and Dad Fox, had two groups of children. Leah was in the first group. And the second group, they had Kate Fox. And Kate was born in Consicon, Prince Edward County, Ontario, up in Canada.
Oh my goodness.
So the Fox sisters, Maggie and Kate, who most people consider American, their parents were American, but they were born in Canada. So perhaps they had dual citizenship, but no one ever discusses that. So in any case, Maggie Fox was born October 7th, 1833. And Kate, or Catherine, people called her Kate or Katie Fox, was born March 27th. Her birthday will be coming up in 27 days, March 27th, 1837. Now, saying all of that, as I mentioned at the end of our last chat, the family had moved from Rockland County up to Canada, where they lived with a sibling of Kate and Maggie's, a daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Fox. And then from Canada, they sort of came across the Great Lake Ontario, and came down to Rochester, where they lived with Amy and Isaac Post, Quakers, and they were movers and shakers in the abolition movement, in the women's suffrage movement, in land rights for First Nation people, and and they became the very first supporters of the Fox sisters in mediumship. In fact, Isaac Post, he was a pharmacist. He became a medium himself. So 1841, Rochester, New York, at 36 Sophia Street, which was a place that the Amy and Isaac Post had. It was their home. It was also a place on the Underground Railroad.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, so the Fox family moves from Canada and lives with the Posts. And so there's already, there's this movement. You only imagine how spirit set things up. So December 11th, 1843, Mr. and Mrs. Post, Maggie and Kate moved to the crossroads, and it's crossroads for so many significant reasons. They moved to the crossroads of 1510 Hydesville and Parker Roads. You can go and visit it. 1510 Hydesville and Parker Roads. I know you've been there many times, Nancy.
Oh, yeah.
And so what had happened was, a few years before, an itinerant peddler, Charles B. Rosna, and some people say his name was Rosma. In any case, he had been murdered in the house. So we're
The
setting
murder mystery. Yeah.
Yeah. So he has been buried in the cellar, and he starts knocking on the walls and knocking on furniture, trying to get someone's attention. Now, December 11th, I'm sorry, they didn't move there in 1843. 1843 was when the peddler was murdered in the house. December 11th, 1847, the Foxes moved to the house where the peddler had been murdered.
Oh.
1510 Hydesville and Parker Road. And they had loaded up, imagine, in Rochester, they loaded up a carriage pulled by a horse, and they made the way from Rochester to Hydesville. Hydesville's, if you're popping down the New York State Thruway, it's near Newark. It's near an exit for Newark, if you're trying to sort of locate it on a map. So it's a very hard, very long winter. And March 31st, 1848, at this crossroads house in Hydesville, Kate Fox, who is 11 years old, here's the peddler knocking. Now, he's been knocking for a few nights, and the family's sort of a little uptight, a little tired. They're not sure what it is. And as Mr. Fox is closing the drapes, swish, swish, Kate, 11 years old, makes this connection that this knocking, this banging throughout the house corresponds to the swishes of the closing curtain. So as her father is closing, swish, swish, we hear bam, bam, bam on the floors, on the walls. Kate says, okay, Mr. Split Fox. Split Fox was an old term used for the devil, and who knows what they thought it could possibly be. She said, do what I do, Mr. Split Fox. And she snaps her fingers, 1, 2, 3. And they hear boom, boom, boom.
Oh, okay.
She keeps doing it. And again, so this deceased peddler, murdered peddler, is making these vibrations off the bed, and the bed's jumping up and down, the walls are shaking. And Maggie jumps in on it too. And a lot of people say, how old were the girls when it all started? Again, Kate was only 11 and Maggie was 14.
Okay.
Okay, because there are many delicious books on the history of spiritualism. Many of them have the ages and dates of their birth wrong.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I think even on their tombstone, it was incorrect. And Marilyn Autry, if I'm correct, is part of a group who corrected it.
No kidding. Is that, and that's where you got the correct dates, was from Marilyn Autry?
Where did I get the correct dates from? Yeah, from you know what? It was a book by Marilyn Autry. Marilyn Autry, you folks want to know history of spiritualism. She has many great books, and her last name is Awtry. She has many great books on the history, and I'd say they're must reads. So, and I get no commission. I just she's just a fountain of information.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And
So-
all right. Pardon?
Yeah, she has a lot of books on spiritualist theology and principles and natural laws. So
Yeah, she has a great book on the history of the formation of the Declaration of Principles for Spiritualism. A really very small book, great read. And anyway, all right. So what happens is by April 1848, hundreds of people visit the cottage at the crossroads, and it's called the Ghost Cottage, the Spook Cottage. And what ends up happening is that there are fishermen who were fishing that night. They came in, they heard the knocks. Their neighbors came over, they heard the knocks, and they developed a system. First, yes, no. You know, are you a spirit? You know, 1 for yes, 2 for no. Yes. You know, did you have a peaceful death here? No. Were you murdered here? Yes. Can you spell out the name of the person who murdered you? So then they went through the alphabet, and it was a long, tedious process, A, B, C. And so the patient spirit knocked every time they hit the right letter. And it spelled out that his name was Charles Rosna. He was a peddler. And that he had been murdered by a man named Mr. Bell, who had lived at the house and with his wife. And he had been murdered for $500 and some trinkets. In fact, the metal peddler's box still exists, even though the Fox house had burned. The metal peddler's box still exists. It was found in the early 1900s in a crumbled wall. There had been a second wall where the peddler's body had been buried. In any case, so that they could never find it when they were looking for it. They looked through the basement. The neighbors did, the Fox family did, reporters did. They couldn't find it because Bell, who'd murdered him, had built a false wall. Anyway, so the peddler's box is in the museum at Lilydale Assembly over in Western New York on Cassadaga Lake. All right, so they go up to Arcadia, New York. The family moves up there because they can't stay in a house where there's all this noise. Excuse me. And people are just flooding in the house. So they moved to Arcadia, New York, up the road. Kate and Maggie go to live at their brother David's farm, 3 miles away. Raps, you know, boom, 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 boom. Raps follow the girls, and men dig up the cellar, but they can't find, again, they can't find the peddler's bones because they were behind a stone wall, you know, in any case.
So why were there so many people coming to the house?
People were fascinated.
Because they said they called people, they told people,
They
word
told
got out.
people, the fishermen told people. The other thing is that this house is 2.2 miles from the Erie Canal. And so people coming down on packet boats on the Erie Canal are stopping. They hear about it. All kinds of people are hearing about it, and they're coming to the spook house.
Oh, so word spread fast. Okay.
Word spread very quickly, especially because it was on the Erie Canal. Initially, that's what I attribute the initial spread of information. Then E. Lewis Esquire of Canandaigua, New York, he hears of the haunting down in Canandaigua. All right. He travels to the Hydesville site. He interviews mom and dad, John and Margaret Fox, and many witnesses. He writes a pamphlet, which includes a petition signed by Mr. Bell's friends, saying that he's an honorable man. He never would have murdered anybody, blah,
boy.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, right.
So,
yeah.
right? Because imagine Mr. Bell is being accused by a dead man, right?
And some teenage girls.
And some teenage girls, exactly. Imagine that. And they're angry, they have sort of a mob-like mentality. So another reason the Fox family doesn't want to stay in that house. I mean, who would want to stay there when, for the next, 50 years, the family's afraid for their lives, even though they become very famous. So what happens? So E. Lewis writes this pamphlet April 11th, 1848. By May 1848, up in Rochester, Leah Fox Fish, living at 11 Mechanics Square, in case anyone wants to go visit these places. In any case, a friend of hers has this pamphlet, hands it to her and says, "Hey, Leah, isn't your maiden name Fox?" Because Leah had been married. So now her name was Leah Fox Fish, and she had a little daughter. Her husband had left her. In any case, so Leah Fox Fish reads the pamphlet and says, "Oh, it's my family." So she gets a friend to come with her, because women didn't travel alone in those days. They take an Erie Canal packet boat from Rochester over to Hydesville. They find the cottage abandoned, and they ask around. They say, "Oh, yeah, the family's up the road at David's." So they go up, Leah goes up to her brothers. Now, Leah, at this time, is 35 years old. A lot of people don't realize the significant age difference between two generations of children. Right. All right. So, and it's interesting. I looked up Leah in the census for different years and different locations. Sometimes her age, she became younger by 10 years. It would be 10 years later, and then suddenly she'd be like, 25 years old. But she was 35 years old.
Okay.
Okay. It's something to keep in mind when we hear how she becomes the road manager, and I'll keep walking you through this if you're interested. How this actually spiritualism takes foot. So, Kate, Leah is at David's house with Kate and the whole family, Kate, Maggie, and the spirits are going wild, throwing things, rapping. The veil between this dimension and the spiritual dimension has been pierced. And they didn't know to say, may only the highest and best go from me and come to me. They didn't know how to set up boundaries to say, I'm open for business, I'm open for spirit, when I am sitting here and at this time, so that they're, professional mediums as yourself, although you may have an antenna up for your family and spirit to come in and for safety reasons, I'm sure you're not open for everybody and anybody in the spirit world to pop into you, and
that would be crazy making.
It would be crazy.
And it would be incredibly stressful.
I can't imagine. This is what was happening to the Fox family. So Leah said, I'm going to separate the girls. They take a packet boat. She takes Kate. She says, I'm going to take Kate with me. Maggie, you stay here. You stay at David's with mom and dad. So Leah took Kate, the youngest, on the packet boat with her. And while they're traveling on the boat, on the Erie Canal, back up to Rochester, we hear the table boom. We hear the side, they're having a lunch meal sitting down and the table's rapping. Boom.
Wow.
Boom. Imagine, and it's not like you can put your long skirt and hide it, because it's a sound. It's not something you can hide with a long skirt and a blanket. And so it's embarrassing. People are looking at them. And what do you say? Oh, it's just some dead spirit, right?
It's just
right. It is not something you would say then. And even today, imagine being on the T riding through Boston on the Green Line.
Oh my gosh.
And the spirit rapping, and you say, oh, it's just my, just some,
pay no attention to this loud noise.
Exactly. Right?
I don't know what it is either.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I don't know who's here. Go away. Imagine them.
Yeah.
And so that's what they were going through. Here they are then. They're in Rochester. They're in Leah's apartment. Communication even intensifies. And instead of decreasing, it's increasing. And the spirit doors open, at night. Kate and Leah are, and Leah's daughter are awakened by cold, invisible spirit hands. And they were throwing, rags would be thrown at them at all times. Imagine.
Robin, I got to stop and ask you a quick question, because this is something somebody just asked it. I have been wanting to know the answer to this. So spirits can follow you wherever you move. Like, I was always under the impression that Charles Rosna stayed in the house, but he did not stay in the house. He followed. Or were these other spirits?
Well, that we don't know.
Okay.
The veil had been pierced, and it could have been, there was a Fox child, I believe a daughter in spirit. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. It could have been her saying, Mom, Dad, hey, I'm alive. I'm over here with the peddler.
Okay.
Okay. And
but to answer that question, spirit does, when as a medium, when I talk to spirit, they're not in their grave. They're not in the house where they used to live. They are right next to me. They are right next to you. So yes, spirit, quite mobile.
My grandparents my grandparents in spirit, they find me wherever I am in the world. They
find you.
They find me. They like the adventures and how I go through them. And so it's interesting, but they're close. I love them dearly. I had a relationship with them on the earth plane. We continue our relationship.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. Yeah.
So it's not that anybody can follow me in spirit. And
no.
So can they? Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Can they?
Can they do that? I want to take another quick break and just mention, because you have something coming up. Reverend Robin Reale has a PhD in special education policy. She's an ordained minister through the Fellowship of the Spirit in Lilydale, New York. And she has some events coming up, and I'd like you to mention it now, and then we'll mention it at the end.
I didn't finish my PhD. I'm ABD, which is all but dissertation. So I always like to clarify that. In any case, I will be up at Camp Etna teaching this summer, July 8th. Joanne Fleiderer will be up there as well teaching. Jason McCush will also be up there, all reverends. Jason was ordained at the Swampscott Church of Spiritualism. Joanne and I were ordained through Fellowships of the Spirit over at Lilydale.
And what are you going to be presenting?
I am presenting a bridge to the teachings of Jesus from spiritualism. And I don't approach Jesus from the King James version of the Bible, but going back to the original language that Jesus spoke, Aramaic. And I go back to the Aramaic version of the Bible. And when you go back to the Aramaic version, you find that spiritualism and the teachings of Jesus mesh.
Okay.
Very nicely. But so in the workshop, I'm gonna go through the Beatitudes, the Lord's Prayer. I'm going to go through the history of the removal of Jesus from the general population and to control of his narrative by politicians.
Yeah.
And
the Roman church, the Romans.
Exactly. And when we see step by step how politicians going back to the Romans have changed his teaching. And so that when years ago, when the Fox sisters came out and then many other people began professional mediumship, they were outcasts in their church, and that is because of the fear and the hierarchical system put in place by politicians going back to about 320 AD. So
that will be worth hearing, really. So Camp Etna is up in Etna, Maine.
Up in Maine, yep.
And if you guys want more information,
we're not on Zoom. I don't believe we'll be on Zoom. So if anyone's interested, you'll have to make the trek on up. All right.
And it's going to be during the weekend. You said July 8th.
It's a Saturday.
Okay.
But Joanne, Jason, and I, along with others from the Swampscott Church of Spiritualism, will all be there for a week.
Wonderful.
Yep. Wonderful. So come on up and find us.
I will.
Yeah,
I know I will. I'm really excited. It'll
be great.
Lots of moving and shaking this summer.
Wow.
In the spiritualist world. Yeah. So Robin, thank you for the little commercial break. But going back to the,
all righty. So, then Leah introduces, they have to move. They get evicted. Leah gets evicted from her apartment because her neighbors complain to Leah's landlord. Imagine this. Noise during the day is one thing, but imagine you're in an apartment in a building and the walls are reverberating. Imagine your neighbors are thinking, wow, what a wild chick this Leah is. And my gosh, she's partying with this 11-year-old and her little daughter and her,
Oh my gosh.
Right. So she gets evicted. They moved to Prospect Street in Rochester, and they do not leave disruptive spirits behind them. And again, I'm not sure if the spirits are Charles Rosna or it seems that it's
Okay.
just a whole group.
Okay. All right.
All right. So Maggie and Mrs. Fox join Leah and Kate at Prospect Street. And they're hoping that Mrs. Fox, who is this wonderful woman, that her serenity and grace will somehow ground them. Anyway, it doesn't. She doesn't, but they come and they get evicted again. And so in the meantime, back at the ranch, as they say, excuse me, Leah, who is a piano teacher, still has to go to work. She's friends with Isaac and Amy Post, sorry, and Leah introduces Kate to them, brings Kate to their house. And spirit comes around, they bring out the alphabet.
Oh.
And the spirit raps out. It's not a horrible sound. It's not a mean knocking. It's not rags flying. It's a spirit rapping. And Kate brings through the name and details through the alphabet rapping of the child in spirit of Amy and Isaac Post.
Oh my goodness.
So this is another crossroads. This is a pivotal moment for spiritualism because the Posts, again, they're this hub for abolition, and then abolitionists become spiritualists. They're a hub for journalists, and they're journalists who become spiritualists. And they make the connection for between Native Americans, Native American spirits, and Native American land and sacred land, and the sacredness of land wherever you go, not just a church. On and on and on. And they're also, the other big spoke is suffragettes. They become part of the women's suffrage movement. In fact, in July 1848, all right, so going back, all of this started March 31st, 1848. In July 1848, we know that there was the Seneca Falls Convention for the suffragists in New York State. Signers of the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments, at this very important, groundbreaking first women's rights conference in the United States. Out of that group who signed the petition, right, this Declaration of Sentiments for women, Amy Post becomes a spiritualist. Isaac Post was there. He becomes a spiritualist. Elab Capron, he becomes a spiritualist. Marianne McClintock, she becomes a spiritualist. Thomas McClintock, he becomes a spiritualist. Mary Hollowell, Sarah Hollowell, they become spiritualists. And Catherine Fish Stebbins, their names you'll find on the Declaration of Rights and Sentiments, and they all became spiritualists. So you see how significant Amy and Isaac Post are.
Holy cow, yes. They're
All right. The hub. And then in August, so that conference was July. In August 1848, Rochester, New York, just to punctuate this a little bit more, the participants in the follow-up Women's Rights Convention who became spiritualists, all right, who were at the Rochester Convention, Susan Anthony Burtis, her cousin is Susan B. Anthony.
Oh.
All right. But Susan B. Anthony, even though she came to Lilydale spiritual when they began this spiritualist camp and over in Lilydale, even though she came there and spoke there, and they had women's rights days, women's suffrage days, Susan B. Anthony never became a spiritualist. She was not, so to speak. However, her cousin became a spiritualist, Susan Anthony Burtis. Susan Anthony Burtis was the first female salesperson in Rochester. Anyway,
Wow.
Rhoda DeGarmos, who was at that convention, became a spiritualist. Abigail Bush, who also was the first female president of a convention, became a spiritualist. Sarah D. Fish became a spiritualist, and Lucy Coleman became a spiritualist.
Wow.
So imagine out of this connection again with Amy and Isaac Post. So, all righty. So then, let me see. So where are we? So September 1848, still in Rochester, Leah, her daughter Lizzie, Maggie, Kate, their mother, and a friend of the family, Calvin Brown, moved to Troop Street in Rochester. So they've been evicted 1, 2, 3 times here. Then let's see, 1848 in Rochester. Very interesting. The family, the Fox family is sitting around a table having a meal, right? And Spirit, their grandfather came through and started rapping by the table. But they were assembled around a table. Prior to this, people would sort of just sit in a living room or sit in rows of chairs. But around a table where family is gathered, came Spirit. You're in a circle, you're sharing something, you're having a common meal together. I mean, there are so many things important about a shared meal with people, but that's for something else. In any case, after that, they often used a table for seances, and people still do.
Okay, that was the first seance.
Well, so to speak, but Grandpa just popped in and is rapping, at supper time,
Oh my God, Grandpa.
Yeah, right. So it's like, while you're all here sitting at the table, I just want to say, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so by 1849, oops, I'm sorry. Yes, by 1849, they've had different committees of people test Kate and Maggie, and Leah is organizing all of this. And again, just so we remind ourselves, she's just so much older than Kate and Maggie. All right. And so Leah's mind's percolating, very bright person. She's beginning to see, wow, we've got something here. And so she sets up committees. Kate is asked to go and live with Eli W. Capron and his family. Now Kate's 12 years old. Kate holds seances. And emerging from that, they form the Auburn Circle because they're in Auburn, New York. So Kate, the testing of Kate by Capron, has then formed without Kate. Kate goes back to Rochester, but it forms the Auburn Circle. Now, while Kate's in Auburn, Leah and Maggie are exhausted. Mischievous spirits are driving them nuts. They ask them to leave. They insist, leave and never come back. And they stop.
Okay.
Everything's quiet. That's it. And then Leah sort of wants them back. So
They're
they
buddies.
get, where'd you guys go? I didn't think you'd really listen to me. You know, it's like, so they come back and Spirit raps out through the alphabet and tells them to rent Corinthian Hall in Rochester. Now, Kate is still in Auburn being tested. So Maggie goes on the stage.
Oh, by herself, without
Well,
Kate.
they have to have men introduce them, men give the preliminary talks, blah, 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 blah. And the man who, there was a man who introduced him, Pierpont, his wife, and I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but they lived in Boston.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, they lived north of Boston. They used to have, that's a famous family. Their son wrote Jingle Bells, I think. You know, dashing through the snow. A very famous, it's also a famous political family. But Mrs. Pierpont sat on the stage with Maggie. And that was the first public demonstration, hundreds of people. Maggie sat on the stage, and I imagine Leah sat with her, Mrs. Pierpont sat with her, and people were curious. And the walls shook, the floors shook. I mean, people were amazed and frightened and in awe, and they didn't know what was going on.
Now, was she able to, Maggie was able to communicate and give messages, or were people just hearing the knockings and the
Do you
shakings?
know what? I think they just heard the knockings and the shaking.
Okay.
So imagine if there's 500 people in a hall, imagine their families in spirit who are saying, hey, wow, this works. Let's get hold of. So imagine the spiritual families of maybe 200, 500 people all rapping at once, right? It's like crazy. I can't imagine. So, all right. So November 15th, 1849, they're in Corinthian Hall. It had just been built in Rochester. And they are investigated by at the Sons of Temperance Hall. And Maggie is made to strip and stand on glasses and do raps. Not in front of everybody, but in front of the people at the Sons of the Temperance Hall. A lot of people don't realize Maggie was tested November 15th, right? And she's scared to death. She was tested the next night, November 16th. There was an investigation in the morning at the New York State Vice Chancellor's office.
Oh, poor thing.
Right? I mean, it's right. What would they say about child cruelty?
Oh my gosh, yes.
All right, so the 15th, the 16th, November 17th, spirit raps resound off the wall, 3 nights now, and Leah is terrified, absolutely terrified. There's a group of men outside, and I've often wondered, is it that Bell guy? Has he stirred them up to discourage? They've got tar and feathers. They're going to tar and feather Maggie.
Oh, this little girl. Oh no.
Can you imagine? So they get up on stage. Maggie says something like, I will do this, even though I feel I may die. I mean,
oh, honey, she was so scared.
Right? She's a teenager. I wouldn't.
So brave.
I'm 66. I can't imagine doing it.
I know.
With a group of people tar and feathering, ready as soon as I step off the stage to kill me. Oh, I can't say what I would do. Anyway, so there's a very kind police captain present, and he instructs all of his police force to bar everybody back and protect Maggie and Leah.
Okay.
All right. So they don't get tarred. All right. So they've had that, they calm down. Then again, so they're doing private seances. Fast forward, April 25th, 1850. They're at Corinthian Hall again, repeat performance. Maggie and Leah return to the hall, this time with Kate.
Ooh.
And they're testing the waters again because Leah has planned a road trip for them.
Oh,
They're going
okay.
on the road. People love them. They're terrific. All right. April 30th, the Fox sisters create a framework for a mediumship career. This is what Leah designs. 1, they're going to have a seance. Introductions are made by a male lecturer. 2, they have platform wraps. All right. People pay to buy tickets for a platform demonstration. 3, people who want individualized and personal messages. Actually, so that answers your previous question. They book a private reading or a reading of 10 people or so with Leah and Maggie and Kate at a private local hotel wherever they're going.
Okay.
So they've got a system. They need a man to travel with them. They need to book a public stage. They need a hotel with a large entertainment room. They need a suite, basically. And 4, they will have seances in private homes.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So you can see to this day, we have public demonstrations of platform.
Yes.
We have some larger seances. And then we have small seances, and then we have one-to-one readings.
One-on-one. Yeah.
So this goes back to, they've sort of codified it by April 30th, 1850. All right. So then 1850, next step is Albany, and it's the first stop on the Fox Sisters tour. They have a suite at the Delavan House, Kate, Maggie, and Leah. May 24th, 1850, they're in Troy, New York. So now, you know New York State well. You're going from Rochester, Albany, you've got Troy, and Kate, Maggie, and Leah hold seances. Then they are sponsored, I believe, by Horace Greeley. And they go to New York City.
Oh my God, Horace Greale, he comes in, he stays in spiritualism for quite a while after that.
Yes, he does. And he is the editor of the New York Tribune. Very famous guy.
Very well placed, very politically, socially. Yeah.
Yes, exact. Thank you. So they stay at the Barnum Hotel. And a lot of people say, oh, Robin, those people, your founders, they were part of the Barnum Circus. People take one word and then fly with it. They hear one thing. They stayed at the Barnum Hotel. Was it owned by the Barnum Circus? Possibly. Could have been, in any case, but they were not in the circus. The Barnum Hotel is at the corner of Broadway and Maiden Lane. If you ever want to find the spot where they stayed, the corner of Broadway and Maiden Lane. Kate, Maggie, and Leah hold 3 wrapping seances a day. All right. And they are chaperoned by their mother. All right. Then they're in Manhattan. Horace Greeley, who ends up being a huge, again, supporter of the Fox family, he invites to a seance at the Barnum Hotel. He invites Oh, some very, very famous people. Judge Edmonds, who saw them at the Corinthian Hall. And anyway, Greeley has this powerful publication. He goes to the Fox sisters and he writes an article about them.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
1850, they're at a home now, the Manhattan home of Rufus Griswold. The Foxes hold a seance for Rufus Griswold. Rufus Griswold invites General Lyman, James Fenimore Cooper, the Leather Stocking Tales, George Ripley, very famous family connected to Ralph Waldo Emerson, Transcendentalists.
Yeah.
George Bancroft, William, and again, author William Cullen Bryant, and N.P. Willis. So still in New York City, and industrialist Charles Partridge converts to spiritualism following seances with Kate and Maggie. So you've got these seances with Kate, Maggie, Leah. Charles Partridge opens his mansion to meetings about spiritualism.
Now let's go back about spiritualism, because we're just hearing about the knockings and Maggie and Kate and Leah are doing things. But is spiritualism starting to develop? Is there belief structure around what they're doing at this point?
Yes, it's belief in contact with the so-called dead.
Okay.
Now, at first it was a movement. And
Okay.
all right. And it didn't have any particular name. And let me see here. I've got this grid laid out here, what you might hear.
Awesome. You're just awesome.
Rustling. Okay. In 1852, Horace Greeley coined the term spiritualists, and your movement is spiritualism. It wasn't until, I'll tell you, hold on a second, November 3rd, 1893, all right, 1893, it became a religion.
Okay.
And that's when the National Spiritualist Association, it wasn't yet of churches.
Okay.
They created the religion.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
Hmm?
About 50 years later, something like that.
They registered the religion in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
as the religion. And the spiritual belief, Ralph Waldo Emerson, up the road here in Concord, he wrote an essay, excuse me, 1836, called Nature. And in his lectures and in his essays, he's talking about a connection to spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so along with, we talked last time when we chatted about Andrew Jackson Davis and how he paved the way, and Johnny Appleseed before him, and before him, Swedenborg over across the pond in Sweden. So we have these people paving the way, talking about an individual connection to God, not requiring a clergy to connect to God and to connect to spirit. And so, again, Emerson wrote a lot about spirit. He didn't talk as we do about contacting people who have transitioned into the spirit life, but it's an easy step. And saying all of that, Emerson was not a spiritualist. He
didn't become, okay.
He did not become a spiritualist. And there are so many things to say about that. And he met Andrew Jackson Davis, but that's a whole nother topic. Okay, so So spiritualism, yes. And it was called modern spiritualism because we have Native American spirituality.
Okay.
All right. And not to be confused with Spiritism that started over in France and by Kardec, but differs from spiritualism mainly. Is Spiritism has a belief in reincarnation, where as codified in Washington, D.C. in 1893, the religion of spiritualism does not include reincarnation, even though many people preach it, practice it. I suppose. I mean, I believe
journeys and hypnosis. Yeah,
exactly. So,
so are you saying you believe in it, or you don't believe in it?
I do. No, I do believe in it. And I was going to say, do I practice it? Well, you wouldn't know that unless, I mean, life after life after life. I practice it. Well, I'm not going to practice it for a while because I'm not ready to transition for a while.
Oh, stop. Yeah.
Right. No, that's it. We don't need proof today, Robin. All right. So they go to New York City, and then let's see, then they go back to Rochester, and they live in Troop Cottage. They're back in Rochester by October 1st, 1850.
1850. Okay.
1850. So they go back to Troop Cottage, and then they go to visit their brother David in Arcadia at his farm. And that David's farm, their brother, always seems to be a place where they go and regenerate.
Okay.
And David goes into town one day, comes back with a newspaper, and the newspaper is just full of what the Fox sisters. They're called the Lions of New York. Yeah, there's a Broadway play after them, and they're just the cat's meow. They're the it girls. So, in any case, they also, imagine they're a little razzle dazzled by it all. They come back. They've lived very simply. Very, very simply, very simple clothes. And people just lauded all kinds of praise and gifts on them. They also started giving Maggie and Kate alcohol, maybe to calm their fear a little bit, maybe to stop their shaking. But as you know, the Fox sisters became alcoholics. And so they were given alcohol. People toasted them all the time. People visited them. And so it was very quickly, it became a very seductive lifestyle.
Oh dear. Oh my goodness.
Imagine, you're down in Hydesville, being a simple, going to the local school around the corner, wearing a simple dress. Your dad's a blacksmith over across the street, and you fetch water from the well, you're doing things like that. And then you come back from New York City with gowns, jewelry, and you've had alcohol.
Yeah, and you're young.
And you're young. And so, all right. So then what happened? So they're back there, and Horace Greeley, his wife, they're grieving their son Picky. And Horace Greeley's wife lives in their farm on Chappaqua, New York. Horace Greeley asks Mr. and Mrs. Fox if Kate can go and live with his wife. Horace mostly lived in a brownstone in Manhattan. And
I heard that it wasn't a good situation between Horace and his wife. Is that true?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
I've read that. And do you know where I think I read that? There's a great book about Victoria Woodhull.
Right. What, Barbara Goodchild, is it?
I can't think, say it again.
Goodchild, was it Barbara Goodchild or something? That's not right.
Oh, could be
And-
the author. It's a huge tome, and it's it's a wonderful book to read. It's
Yeah.
full of treasures of spiritualism. It might have been in there. They met, Horace and his wife Mary met at Cheney was her maiden name, at a Graham house. And Graham houses were places where it was like an experiment in nutrition, where a man named Graham had a graham cracker diet. And that's the precursor of like the Nabisco graham crackers that we eat.
Yeah.
And that we make s'mores with. And anyway, but Mary Greeley practiced a really bare bones version of the graham cracker, the graham diet. It was severe. That's just severe. So Horace said, look I'll give your daughter a private education. She'll have the best teachers. You learn piano and French and blah, 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 blah. So the Fox family, they said, okay, great. We'll let her go there. We'll let her go. And so Kate Fox goes out to Chappaqua and lives with Mary Cheney. And she is expected all the time to bring through the spirit of Picky. Kate's exhausted. She's lonely. I have a letter that she wrote to Amy Post. And Kate says, oh, dear Amy, I'm pleading with you. I'm so lonely out here. Can you get my mother to let me come home? All Mrs. Greeley wants me to do is talk to her dead son all day and bring him through. And I'm tired and cold and the food is crappy. It's like,
poor thing.
Right? Anyway. So
I did find that book, by the way, I was looking online and I wanted to tell people Other Powers.
Yes.
The Age of Suffrage, Spiritualism, and the Scandalous Victoria Woodhull, who ran for president, by Barbara Goldsmith. I got the name wrong, but that has a tremendous history of spiritualism in between all of the intrigue. So
thank you. Yes, and Victoria Woodhull, as you're saying, ran for president in 1872 against Horace Greeley and General Grant. So we know that General Grant won, he became president, but she ran for president even when she couldn't vote. So, okay. So then Kate is now off in Chappaqua, extremely unhappy. She said that they live in darkness, that Mrs. Greeley keeps all the drapes drawn. She's really, really sad. So in the meantime, 1850, Maggie is sent to the Burton family in Troy, and her life is threatened and she has to escape by stagecoach. Imagine, people are threatening. A mob came to the house and she had to escape somehow the next day. December 16th, 1850, the University of Buffalo, they investigate Maggie and Leah. The doctors are really glib at the University of Buffalo, and they're harsh, and they call it neology. So at that time, remember how strict people were. Women wore long dresses. And they were putting their hands like up under the dress on little Kate, not Kate, Kate's off in New York, on Maggie's knees. And they're saying the raps are coming from Maggie's knees, and they call it neology. March 1851, they're back in Rochester, Maggie and Leah, not Kate. Kate is still at the Greeley's house. Maggie and Leah regroup amid accusations that they produced the raps by cracking their toe joints.
Oh,
These two,
yeah.
yeah, right. The Burr, B-U-R-R, the Burr brothers have an aggressive campaign against the Fox sisters. They call what they do toeology. So University of Buffalo is calling them etniology. The Burr brothers have a smear campaign. They're calling it toeology. Then May 1851, another road trip. Leah takes Maggie on the road. They go to Cleveland, Ohio, and they take a boat across Lake Erie, and they confront the slandering Burr brothers.
Okay.
Leah is smart. She courts the press. Right? Imagine how tactical she is. She writes them, we're coming, she flirts, blah, 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 on and on and on. And all the while they're traveling with a male companion. His last name is Brown, friend of the family. All right. She and Maggie hold local mediumship circles. Then they are in Cleveland, Ohio. Kate and Maggie join Leah. Now, Kate is allowed to join. She adds some extra oomph to it all. Yeah, she's released from Chappaqua.
Out of jail. Yeah.
Out of jail. Leah, in defense of their murder, of their mediumships, they hold these seances. The Burr brothers, again, continue to say, you Fox sisters, you're just toe-cracking hoaxes. July 1851, they move on to Columbus, Ohio. Leah has a lawsuit, takes formal proceedings. She sues the Burr brothers, and the Fox sisters win $10,000 in damages.
Oh, that's a lot of money back then.
Imagine the spirit. Now their people are calling them spirit rappers. They have this name. So the spirit rappers' reputation has been restored.
Now, the spirit rappers, I got this question because of our mental mediumship. Is it still just rapping? Are they getting messages? Do they know who's rapping at this point? Or
well, they're knowing who's rapping by going through the alphabet.
Okay, the alphabet. They're doing, okay. It's kind of like table tipping, the alphabet.
Yeah.
Okay.
They could do yes, no questions too, to sort of start diving in. As far as I know, later on in life, Kate becomes like a trance medium, and she can get messages. I have a book of this. She gets messages and she writes backwards with both hands at the same time, different pieces of a message.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Wow.
So
can we find that book? Can you remember the?
I would have,
That's all right.
you know what? Wait, I think I wrote it down. I have it in the other room, but then I'd have to stand up.
That's all right. Yeah.
Let me see. Kate, I have to look for the year. She wrote it while she was at the Taylor Swedish Movement Cure Spa.
Okay.
She was being treated for alcoholism.
Oh.
That was in 1865. But I can't find, I have the name of it and I have the book in the other room. If we have time, well, we're already at 8 o'clock. You want me to keep going?
We could keep going, or we could reconvene later. It sounds like there's a whole nother chapter to the Fox sisters, plus how it transitioned over to more mediumship, if you would like to.
So we'll convene. Let's reconvene another time. I think, I don't know if I can yeah, because there's a lot more. There's their transition into their private mediumship, their marriages,
Yes,
and
yes.
they have, both of them have their hearts broken,
Oh, so sad.
horribly.
Um,
Kate
so-
ends up having
yeah.
2 boys.
Oh,
Maggie
so
has
sweet.
2 children. So yeah,
We
they
could-
both
yeah,
they both marry famous men,
and then they had their hearts broken.
and then they had their hearts broken.
Wow. I had one question come in, just because we're talking about the alphabet and the knocking. What is you may not know this, but did a Ouija board come out of this at all? Was there, or is that before or
No,
after?
I don't know the year. There's a lot of controversy around the original Ouija board. And I read one account in a old newspaper article that it was stolen from somebody else, and then
Oh,
somebody mass produced it. I don't know the truth of anything,
okay.
if you just see it in one place. Oh, I remembered the name of that book, The Fox Taylor Record.
The Fox Taylor record. Okay, guys, Fox Taylor record. Google it and see what you
Yeah.
can find.
I think I got it. I think I bid for it on eBay.
Oh, it's that old.
It was yeah, it's generally, I don't think I don't know if they still publish it. It's usually not for sale. I mean, I've never seen it for sale in a regular bookstore or in a
Okay,
spiritualist bookstore or a camp.
okay.
I saw it and I said, wow, there's a copy for sale. I want it. Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
in any case. So oh, actually there is a copy of this at the archives of the Skidmore Library at Lilydale Assembly. They have an original copy.
The Skidmore Library. Okay.
It's in their archives though, it's not in their general selection.
Okay. Wow.
Anyway. So any other questions? Yeah, we'll have to reconvene then.
Yeah, we have a lot of people listening and they find it very interesting. And I would be so thrilled to reconvene and talk a little bit about. I'm fascinated with the whole thing of where Leah designed how to do mediumship, and we're still doing that. It's
Yeah,
amazing to me.
I mean, I add that piece in because I think it's important to know. A lot of people say, where did this come from? Did somebody invent this? So it's a progression of one thing that led to another, but it was not an easy progression. I mean, remember, women, these are from some of the first public women speakers, and they're
Right.
speaking to what we would call a promiscuous audience. And promiscuous back in those days meant male and female in attendance.
Right.
And they had to have a man with them at all times.
They did.
And
Yes. Yeah.
and their lives are constantly being threatened. Corinthian Hall in Troy, New York, the Burr brothers, people anxious to prove them hoaxes, like the professors at University of Buffalo. So in any case, it's just kind of interesting, I find. And if people could get hold of you with questions for next time.
Absolutely. Yes, please. Yeah. Direct message me. Yeah.
Then you could send those to me, Nancy, and I can try and address them.
That'd be awesome. And people, everyone who's listening or people who are coming on later, you can direct message me through Facebook, because you're on my page, and you just hit click message and say this is for Robin, and lay out the questions. I did find so please do that, because Robin is just a wealth of knowledge. I did find the Fox Taylor record in publishing house called Wiser Antiquarian, and it is 125. It's a green bound book. But it's Taylor.
Yep.
And I think that would be a really important part of spiritualist history, and the automatic writing, and the fact that she wrote it backwards. It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And so Kate, Kate went there to get sober. Maggie wouldn't go. Horace Greeley was one of the people who paid for her to go there.
So,
But so while she's trying to get sober, the family dearly wants to connect with their loved ones, and she's getting readings. Do you know? So
yeah.
Imagine. So she doesn't really have a chance to rest then. She does get a break. We'll talk about that next time. Somebody
Okay.
really cuts her a wonderful break and changes her life.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But
Yeah,
in the time, Kate would go. Maggie had her own apartment, and Maggie was getting drunk, and Kate would go off, would leave the institute, the Taylor Institute, I guess they called it a spa, and go live with Maggie for a few days, go on a bender, and then come back and sober up. And it was hard, because they had to continue to go back into the same environment that triggered their alcoholism.
Oh, and so they were never quite free of it.
Right. Kate was for a while, Maggie was for a while, but they,
Well, there is a history of mediums, not just Kate and Maggie, and not just alcoholism, but different illnesses, different exhaustions, where mediums were just working themselves to physical exhaustion, especially when physical mediumship came in. There is a book, an article you could look for, Baltimore Magazine, Not Dead Yet. It's about the history of the Ouija board, if people want to look for it. It's Dark Side of the Ouija board, and developed in the 19th century. It looks like, I'm just cruising through it, so if people want to read up, I don't necessarily look that it's a spiritualist, an outcrop of spiritualism. It's just probably an outcrop of people being fascinated at that point with death and living, spirits living beyond death. So just to fill you in. So
and
thanks.
well, you imagine it started with what they did that night of March 31st, 1848. You had yes, no questions. Your planchette can go to yes or no, right? On the Ouija board. And then there's the alphabet.
Exactly. So that would make perfect sense that somebody would have figured it out and designed it.
So March 31st, 1848 is the origin of that communication system with spirit.
Well, it's true. Yeah. And then it went from there. So in that sense, it could have just developed from the Fox sisters, from that spiritualist thing. But I'm not sure that the Fox sisters ever used the Ouija board. I guess I wanted to make that clear.
I can't. Oh yeah, I cannot say that I've read an account of that.
Okay. This has been awesome. I don't want to take advantage of you. We've been doing or going into it, but this has been a tremendous amount of information. I've never heard all this information. I've seen the stories in abbreviated ways, but this puts so much depth, and it helps me and other mediums to understand just how the progression. And I'm really curious to know who was the next medium that was not a Fox sister, and what type of mediumship did they do? And we could talk about that later if you want. Yeah,
just quickly, remember from last time, even before the Fox sisters, there was Andrew Jackson Davis going into trance, downloading Swedenborg. And so downloading, he downloaded a 700-page book on nature's principles. And yeah, hello.
Yeah.
So that happened, but I think the Auburn Circle, and then Isaac Post developed into a medium. Then you had Cora Hatch. Cora Hatch started a church, I want to say Chicago, but she was very big in the education branch of the NSA.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've
Education.
got
Yeah.
Cora Hatch. You had some powerhouses here in Boston. And, saying all of this, and you also have First Nation individuals who just do this as a part of their spirituality.
Right. Right.
You've got medicine men and medicine women who are bringing through spirit in Lakota Yuwipi ceremonies, ongoing for I don't know how many years, hundreds of years. You've got their inipi, their sweat lodges, where often the medicine man or medicine woman will bring you a message. But for them, it's spiritual. And it's sacred, and it's not without connecting to all the elements, the four directions, Mother Earth and Father Sky, and right. And so you have all of that going on. So we didn't invent any of that, and the Fox sisters didn't invent that.
No,
right? They were predecessors to all of us, as was the Oracle of Delphi and so many, right?
Right. This is, so many of them. And this is just a defined by its time. And they were not First Nation people, and they did not have a specific spiritual practice. Probably they went to church and things, but this really stepped into a place where nobody understood what they were doing.
And other countries, I lived in Chad and Senegal, and individuals there had spiritual practices where they contacted spirit. And I'm sure, that was going on for thousands of years with a Fox sister before Andrew Jackson Davis.
Exactly. I think even in any indigenous group of people in any part of the world, we're not separated from the truth of what we're talking about now until the Roman political developed kind of Christianity
in Siberia.
Exactly.
It's not, we didn't invent this. We call it modern spiritualism. So we don't own it. We didn't invent it. It's just codified.
Yeah. But it's brought into a whole brand new culture. So it makes it a fascinating story in a sense, But so love it, Robin. I think we're gonna call it now, and I'll let everybody know the next time we're gonna do the next version of this.
Right.
I really appreciate your wisdom and all of your knowing.
I enjoy the chat. I always learn something too, Nancy. So thank you for the chat.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Peace be with you, and everybody take these stories home to you. And a great discussion. Maria says thank you. She's lots of thanks coming from Facebook, and you'll hear it more, I'm sure, later. Yeah. So you take care, and everybody use these tools. Lots of info. Use these tools to learn and grow. And these times aren't over with. They're still going. So, this is exciting news, but keep it going, guys. So thank you, Robin, again.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.